what goes on in primary school through my conversations with different people. Each guest will have the same 3 questions. What are the key things we need to know about the topic? What does that look like for students? And what might parents notice? Tune in each week, the link from the e-brief, and let the learning begin. As always, I'm so excited to welcome my guest this week, and that is Dave Caleb. Dave is our current digital literacy coach. So before we begin on our questions, Dave, tell us a little bit about your journey to UWC.
Well, I'm from Canada and I taught in Canada before moving overseas. I moved to Vietnam and taught at the United Nations International School in Hanoi for 6 years. And then I moved to Singapore and worked at UWC. This is my 11th year here. I started off as a grade 4 classroom teacher, and now I'm into my role as a digital literacy coach in the primary school and infant school.
And actually, as a coach, that's what our topic is this week. So screen time. Some of us are on HBL at the moment, so it's a very topical issue. Screen time, too much? Are we asking the right questions? Over to you.
Yeah, I think one of the things, there's some key things that I think everyone needs to know about screen time. First of all, we need to define it. One of the things that's happened in the past is that you can find research on screen time, and that screen time is talking about watching television. So you might see these headlines about screen time and limits and all these things, but it may be talking about television. So we need to be aware of that. And that all changed when we have devices that are now these touch screens where it's so much more than just watching something. So the first and most important thing that we need to understand is that not all screen time is the same. In fact, there are 4 distinct types of screen time. So the first one is passive consumption. So that's like watching television, reading, listening to music. We're just passively consuming something. The next one is interactive consumption. So you might be browsing the internet or you might be playing a game. The third type is communication. So this might involve video chatting, using social media. And finally, the fourth type is content creation. So that's using your device to make digital art, music, or some other artifacts. And the important thing is we can't treat all of these things as the same thing. They're not all the same. One of the things that we know is that when our brain is watching something, it is not very active. So if somebody's watching television or something on a screen like an iPad, then the brain is not very active. But it is much more active if they're doing something like creating or communicating. So we need to stop lumping all screen time together. And one of the things that parents can do with this is, in terms of understanding, is talking to their child about screen time and joining in. So whatever they're doing, if a child is interested in something like Minecraft, for example, talk to them about it. Maybe try to play it with them. That's one of the things, your kid will love you for that. You may not be very good at it, and that's okay, but show an interest and have them explain what they're doing. Ask them some key questions. Why is this significant? Why is this important? And this can lead to some discoveries, concerns, issues, anything. So it's really important that we get involved.
It's really interesting when you broke it down into those 4 points or 4 areas. They absolutely make sense, but we do normally think of screen time in one big lump sum. So it's great to actually get the listeners and ourselves to really think about that. So the second question on the Patter with Pauline podcast is, what might that look like for students then?
Yes, and this is important. I think one of the things as parents, as educators, we need to make sure our students understand that there are those 4 types of screen time. That's important for them to know too. And they can start by understanding that, if I'm creating something, if I'm making a stop motion video, that's going to be different than me just watching television. So when you look at options for screen time and balances, you can't treat them all the same, and kids shouldn't be treating them all the same. So parents might choose different approaches when it comes to their children in terms of, what students, this might look like for students. Different parents will choose different approaches. Some might choose a rule-based approach, and they might say, okay, you're going to have this amount of screen time and that's it. And the parents are going to have to set the rules and enforce the rules. Or the parents might choose to have a more of a conversational-based approach where the students their kids are involved in the decision making and understanding. You're working together. This is something that I really want to make sure we're all in this together. And another thing that it might look like for a student is looking at the data. So one of the things I really like to do with my own kids is look at on an iPad or maybe on a computer, there is a screen time feature. And you can look in there and have conversations. It will say, you spent this number of minutes on this app, or you spent this amount of time. And it's not meant to shame them or to blame. It's meant to have conversations. I have those conversations with my kids and say, hey, listen, looks like you've spent a lot of time in here. What do you think? What do you think you might do? And they'll be the ones to say, actually, you know what? I need to get outside. I need to do some other things. So it's a great way for parents and their kids to get together and work together on this, because we're all in this together.
That's really interesting now. I was feeling, if you could see my face, I was feeling a bit guilty because it does pop up on my phone, on my iPad, on my computer, how much screen time I've had this week. But moving into the last question, which is what parents might notice, I think you've talked really well there. As if we with the children have the conversation, if that starts happening, what might parents notice then?
That's really, really good question. So as parents, one of the first things that I think we need to recognize is that our kids may be involved in something. Maybe they're excited about something. So as parents, one of the things you should take into account is giving your kids a warning. Now, I'm not saying like, hey, 5 minutes, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, giving them more time. That's not what this is about. Because sometimes you're in a game or you're in a situation, you're creating something, and if I say, it's off right now, that can be very distressing. So giving them that 5-minute warning, they have that time. It's not 5 minutes of additional time. It's just a warning. That's going to be really helpful as a parent. And parents, when you notice this, that you're working together with your child, you're going to see that the more conversations, you're going to see fewer battles over these issues, because you're on the same side. You want this time together, and that's the other thing. Time together is really important. If you have this time together, maybe you're playing the same game, or you're trying something, or you're creating something together, you're going to feel closer as a family. And one of the things I always tell parents is to name your own screen time. Actually, a lot of research shows that parents are on their screens a lot more than their kids. And that's really interesting. But sometimes, like with myself, what I'll do is I'll just name what I'm doing, because my kids might see me on my phone and they might think, oh, Dad's just on Facebook or doing this. And you know what? I might be looking up a recipe, or I might be ordering groceries, or I might be doing all sorts of things. So I really like to name what I'm doing. I'll say, oh, I'm just going to be ordering groceries. So they can just see, and they're not making any assumptions.
I think that's really important. But I think from today, the main message I take as a parent myself is actually to have the conversation in the first place and explain those different categories, because actually, I wouldn't mind my child being on the computer longer if they're creating something. And quite often, my children are a bit older now, but that's what we used to do. They used to teach me, because of course they surpassed my ability very early on. And so that creating or co-creating is fantastic. And yet there's still space for just the passive as well. But as long as that conversation's alive in the household, I think there's going to be a far more healthy relationship with screen time.
Absolutely. You're in this together. Work together, have those conversations, and you'll see positive results.
Now, I just want to end by, first of all, thanking you very much. A really, really interesting podcast this week. And we can find out more. Have we got a webinar coming up?
We do. We have a webinar coming up. It's this week. And actually, I have some resources that I'll be sharing from that webinar as well. So, but it's really important. If you have any questions, if you need some extra support, always, reach out. We're here to help support you and your child.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. And it wasn't planned this way, but it looks like it was, as we've moved into home-based learning. A really, really prime time to have those conversations with your students. So tune in next week, same time, same place, for the Patter with Pauline podcast.